Hollywood has always been accused of leading kids astray. From leather jackets to loud music, every generation has pointed to the movies as the reason the youth are out of control. But were these films really that dangerous? Or were they just reflections of what young people were already feeling? What happens when a movie becomes a scapegoat for society's bigger fears? Let's dive into 15 classics that were accused of corrupting youth and discover the panic versus the reality. Reefer Madness, 1936. Imagine a film so over the top its bizarre, cautionary advice feels like a prank. Reefer Madness is a 1936 educational film meant to scare parents by showcasing a teenage spiral into chaos. In its wild narrative, teens are led astray, slide into crime, hallucinate, and face dire consequences, all wrapped in sensational scenes that turn fear into the main character. Despite, or perhaps because of, its alarmist tone, it became infamous as one of the cult classics demonizing youth behavior. To its original audiences, the film was a dire warning. Watch your children, or they'll fall prey to moral decay. The storyline is relentless, the dialogue dramatic, and the acting so exaggerated it borders on parody. Parents at the time took it as proof that certain behaviors would lead their children down an irreversible path. But decades later, college campuses embraced it, ironically turning Reefer Madness into an underground hit celebrated for its camp value rather than its caution. The real twist? Modern audiences see it not as a guide, but a satire, one that unintentionally mocks the fear it was meant to fuel. It laid bare the absurdity of scare tactics by treating every trope as fact. Instead of corrupting youth, Reefer Madness ended up becoming a comedic relic, a mirror reflecting how exaggerated moral panic can become entertainment in itself. The panic was that it would terrify teens into moral collapse. The reality? It became the movie students laughed at doors open, showing that even the most fear-fueled films can backfire in the most creative ways. Blackboard Jungle, 1955. If one film was accused of causing chaos in theaters, it was Blackboard Jungle. This gritty school drama starred Glenn Ford as a teacher facing violence and indifference in an inner-city classroom. But it wasn't the story alone that caused the uproar, it was the soundtrack. The movie famously used Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock over its credits, the first time rock music had thundered through a cinema speaker. Audiences went wild. Reports of teens dancing in aisles, clapping along, and in some cities even rioting spread across the country. The press immediately declared the film dangerous, saying it encouraged delinquency. Lawmakers demanded tighter controls, calling it proof that movies were responsible for corrupting young minds. But the reality? The so-called riots were often exaggerated. Yes, teens got rowdy, but the energy was more about excitement than rebellion. For many, it was simply the first time their music was validated by Hollywood. The controversy made the film a hit, and it opened the floodgates for rock and roll in the movies. Instead of corrupting, Blackboard Jungle marked the cultural handoff from swing to rock. Parents panicked, but kids found an anthem. In hindsight, it wasn't the end of discipline, it was the start of a new cultural soundtrack. The Wild One, 1953. "What are you rebelling against?" Marlon Brando's characters asked. His answer? "What do you got?" That single line from The Wild One sent a chill through America in 1953. The film told the story of motorcycle gangs invading a small town, clashing with police and townsfolk, and leaving destruction in their wake. To parents, it was a blueprint for anarchy. Suddenly, young men in leather jackets and motorcycles weren't just hobbyists. They were dangerous outsiders. Some towns banned the movie outright, calling it a threat to public order. Life magazine even ran photos of real biker gangs to show the menace spilling from the screen into real life, but the truth was less dramatic. Brando's character, Johnny, wasn't a mastermind of chaos. He was restless, alienated, and looking for purpose, something many young people could relate to. The danger of the film came more from how cool Brando looked in his leather jacket than from the story's violence. Sales of black leather jackets spiked after the film's release, and bad boy fashion became a cultural statement. In the end, the Wild One didn't create rebellion, it stylized it. The panic was that kids would start biker gangs. The reality was that they started shopping for Brando's look. Easy Rider, 1969. By the late 1960s, America was already divided between traditional values and a counterculture of freedom, music, and road trips. Easy Rider rode straight into that tension. The film followed two bikers, played by Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper, on a cross-country trip, embracing the ideals of freedom, community, and escape from mainstream society. For young audiences, it was a dream, a rejection of rules in favor of open highways and independence. For adults, it was a nightmare. Critics accused the movie of romanticizing lifestyles that parents feared would ruin their kids. Some theaters even faced protests demanding the film be pulled. What made Easy Rider especially controversial was its unfiltered tone. It didn't offer a clear moral lesson at the end. Instead, it showed characters trying to find America and discovering intolerance instead. That honesty felt threatening to the older generation, who preferred movies that reinforced authority and tradition. But the real impact, Easy Rider became a generational touchstone, proving that young audiences wanted movies that spoke to their experiences, not their parents' expectations. It helped launch the new Hollywood era, where filmmakers told raw, personal stories without the tidy endings of the past. The panic was that the film would lead kids astray. The reality was that it simply put the counterculture already happening onto the screen. Taxi Driver, 1976. When Taxi Driver premiered in 1976, critics called it a dangerous mirror of urban decay. Robert De Niro's Travis Bickle, a lonely cabbie spiraling into violence, struck a nerve. He was intense, unstable, and frighteningly relatable to anyone who felt left behind by society. The infamous "You talkin' to me" monologue became a catchphrase for alienation. Parents and politicians panicked, claiming the film glorified vigilante behavior. The ending, where Bickle is hailed as a hero after violent acts, sparked debates about whether the movie condoned or criticized his choices. Some said it would inspire copycats, while others argued it exposed uncomfortable truths about isolation in modern cities. The reality is more complex. Director Martin Scorsese crafted the film as a character study, not a guidebook. Travis isn't celebrated, he's tragic. The grime of New York, the constant rain, the neon lights, all painted a picture of loneliness that resonated far beyond the plot. Instead of corrupting, the film forced audiences to confront the shadows of urban life that they preferred to ignore. The panic was that Travis Bickle would become a role model. The reality? He became a cautionary symbol of what happens when loneliness and frustration boil over. Taxi Driver didn't encourage, it warned. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. When Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange hit theaters, it was like a cultural earthquake. Here was a film drenched in style, music, and youth culture, but also in unsettling acts that rattled critics and parents alike. The story of Alex, a charming yet dangerous gang leader, struck terror into adults who thought it glorified delinquency. In Britain, it was accused of sparking real-life copycat crimes. And the controversy became so heated that Kubrick himself asked for the film to be pulled from circulation in the UK for decades. To young viewers, though, the film wasn't a how-to manual. It was a provocation. Kubrick painted Alex as charismatic, yes, but also trapped in a world where his free will was stripped away by government control. The bright costumes, surreal sets, and use of classical music made it unforgettable, but the underlying message was far from simple rebellion. The panic was that teens would see Alex as a hero. The reality was more layered. Alex's journey is about choice, punishment, and the blurred line between freedom and control. Instead of corrupting youth, A Clockwork Orange forced a generation to question authority, morality, and the systems meant to keep them in line. It wasn't easy viewing then, and it isn't now, but it remains one of cinema's boldest provocations. Bonnie and Clyde, 1967. Bonnie and Clyde didn't just make headlines, it detonated them. Starring Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway as the infamous outlaw couple, the film blended glamour with grit, turning history's bank robbers into cinematic icons. For older audiences, this was appalling. The stylish clothes, the smirks, the fast cars. It all looked like Hollywood was turning crime into fashion. Critics accused the movie of glamorizing reckless behavior, and, most controversially, of portraying violence in a way that was both shocking and strangely beautiful. The climactic slow-motion finale became one of the most talked-about sequences in movie history. Parents and politicians feared the movie would encourage young audiences to idolize lawbreakers. But the reality is that Bonnie and Clyde didn't sugarcoat their fate. The couple's story ends brutally, reminding viewers that crime may look stylish, but it comes at a cost. What truly scared critics wasn't the supposed corruption. It was the shift in how films were made. This was the birth of the new Hollywood era, where violence wasn't hidden off-screen and heroes weren't always noble. The panic was that teens would dress like Bonnie and Clyde and run wild. The reality? They dressed like them, sure, but mostly to copy the fashion, not the life choices. The movie didn't cause delinquency, it redefined modern filmmaking. Natural Born Killers, 1994. Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers arrived in the 1990s like a lightning bolt. The story of Mickey and Mallory, two lovers on a violent spree, was presented in a dizzying, surreal style, cutting between news broadcasts, commercials, and hallucinations. The movie itself felt like a fever dream, and it terrified adults who believed it blurred the line between entertainment and reality. The controversy wasn't just theoretical. The film was blamed, fairly or unfairly, for inspiring several real-world crimes, and lawsuits were filed against Stone. Critics argued that it made violence look hip, with flashy editing and a pounding soundtrack that teenagers couldn't resist. It became a lightning rod for debates about whether movies could actually cause young people to copy what they saw on screen. But here's the reality. Natural Born Killers wasn't designed as a cheer for chaos. It was a satire. Stone aimed to expose how the media glamorizes crime, turning criminals into celebrities and tragedies into entertainment. The frantic style was meant to critique, not to celebrate. Of course, satire doesn't always land. Some viewers took it at face value, fueling the panic. Yet decades later, the film is remembered less as a corrupting influence and more as a razor-sharp commentary on America's obsession with fame and spectacle. The panic was real. But the corruption? Mostly in the eye of the beholder. Friday the 13th, 1980. If you want to talk about parents panicking, look no further than Friday the 13th. Released at the dawn of the slasher craze, it featured a summer camp where teens meet grisly fates one by one. The formula was simple, but the impact was massive. Critics howled that it was nothing but a lesson in carnage, designed to warp young minds and encourage morbid thrills. Some communities even tried to block the film entirely, calling it indecent for young audiences. But here's the twist. Teens loved it. The movie tapped into the thrill of being scared together, the adrenaline rush of suspense, and the fun of daring your friends to watch without covering their eyes. Instead of corrupting, it became a rite of passage for a new generation of horror fans. What really rattled critics was the lack of moralizing. In older films, misbehavior was punished, and good always triumphed. Friday the 13th offered no such comfort. Its unpredictability made adults uneasy, but it also made the movie a sensation. The panic was that kids would grow up obsessed with fear. The reality? They grew up obsessed with horror movies, turning the genre into a billion-dollar industry. Rock and Roll High School, 1979. If there was ever a movie that terrified principals and thrilled students, it was Rock and Roll High School. Released in 1979, this wild comedy put the Ramones front and center and turned a high school into a stage for pure chaos. To adults, it wasn't just a movie. It was a how-to manual for disobedience. Students cutting class, teachers mocked, rules broken, and the walls of authority literally shaking to the sound of guitars? For some school boards, this was the definition of corrupting influence. At the heart of the story is Riff Randell, a music-obsessed teen who dreams of seeing the Ramones live. She organizes her classmates, outsmarts the strict principal, and stages a full-on student takeover. What scared critics was how the movie made rebellion look fun, even triumphant. This wasn't a cautionary tale where authority wins at the end. The kids actually succeed, and the Ramones become their heroes. Parents groups accused the film of glamorizing disrespect for teachers and encouraging a throw-out-the-rulebook attitude. Some schools even discouraged screenings or tried to block local theaters from showing it, fearing it would inspire real-life chaos in hallways. But to teens, it was a liberation fantasy. The music, the humor, the energy. It was a chance to imagine fighting back against rules that felt outdated. The reality? Rock and Roll High School didn't start riots. It gave young viewers a safe space to laugh at authority and celebrate music as an outlet. Instead of corruption, it inspired loyalty to rock culture, helping cement the Ramones as punk legends. The panic was that it would break schools. The reality is that it gave teens an anthem, proving that sometimes rebellion looks a lot like joy. Psycho, 1960. When Alfred Hitchcock unleashed Psycho, audiences had no idea what was coming. The infamous shower sequence alone became one of the most shocking moments in cinema history. Parents and critics alike claimed it was too disturbing for young viewers, fearing it would warp imaginations and encourage unhealthy obsessions with suspense and fear. Some theaters even refused to screen it at first, citing concerns over its impact. But Hitchcock was a master manipulator. He wasn't just trying to scare, he was redefining how stories could be told. Killing off the apparent main character halfway through the movie broke every storytelling rule of the time. The black and white cinematography, eerie score, and unsettling performance from Anthony Perkins created a world where safety didn't exist. The panic was that kids would leave theaters too terrified to function. The reality was more interesting. Psycho sparked a boom in psychological thrillers and showed that audiences could handle more intensity than studios assumed. Instead of ruining a generation, it made horror and suspense more sophisticated. Hitchcock didn't corrupt youth, he taught them to expect the unexpected, and in doing so, he changed film forever. Kids, 1995. Few movies in the 1990s created as much controversy as Kids. Filmed in a raw, documentary-style format, it followed a group of teenagers across a single summer day. Its depictions of recklessness, risky behavior, and aimless wandering were so blunt that critics accused it of being irresponsible, calling it a blueprint for corruption. The panic was immediate. Parents worried that simply watching the film would encourage young people to imitate its characters. But the reality was more complex. Director Larry Clark intended it as a wake-up call, not a celebration. The rough, grainy style was meant to feel unfiltered, as if the camera had dropped into a world adults preferred to ignore. Teens weren't portrayed as glamorous rebels. They were messy, flawed, and vulnerable. The movie sparked fierce debates about representation, responsibility, and censorship. Some countries gave it restrictive ratings, while others tried to block it entirely. Yet for many viewers, it was less about corruption and more about recognition, an unvarnished portrayal of what some already saw around them. Kids didn't create problems, it forced people to talk about them. The panic was loud, but the reality was that it gave a voice to experiences often hidden from mainstream film. The Outsiders, 1983. Francis Ford Coppola's The Outsiders came from S.E. Hinton's best-selling novel, and while it was aimed at young audiences, it still sparked alarm. The story of rival groups, the Greasers and the Sox, deals with fights, class divides, and young lives lost. Critics worried it glamorized gang rivalries and made rebellion seem noble. Some schools even hesitated to screen it, fearing it would encourage impressionable students to pick sides in real life. But here's the reality. While the movie features brawls and tension, it's deeply rooted in themes of brotherhood, empathy, and the search for meaning. Ponyboy's narration, the reflective tone, and the tragic consequences of conflict show that violence isn't a solution. It's a trap. The film resonated so strongly that it became a staple in classrooms, taught as literature as much as cinema. For teens, it wasn't about imitation, it was about connection. They saw themselves in characters who felt stuck between who they were and who society told them to be. The panic was that the Outsiders would create more Greasers and Sox. The reality is that it created readers, thinkers, and a lasting message about finding common ground. West Side Story, 1961. When West Side Story burst onto screens, it looked like a musical, but it carried far more weight than Broadway-style numbers. The tale of rival gangs, the Sharks and the Jets, was infused with vibrant dance sequences and unforgettable songs. But behind the choreography lay turf, battles, loyalty tests, and young love caught in the crossfire. Critics and parents worried that the film's mix of beauty and violence glamorized gang culture and interracial relationships that some considered controversial at the time. The panic was especially sharp in schools, where administrators feared kids might imitate the stylized rumbles or see conflict as romanticized. But the truth is that West Side Story was always about tragedy. Its Romeo and Juliet roots highlight the futility of hate and the cost of prejudice. Instead of encouraging delinquency, the film made audiences cry, reflect, and hum unforgettable melodies on the way out of the theater. Young viewers weren't inspired to fight, they were inspired to dream. The panic saw it as dangerous. The reality? It was a heartbreaking musical that used energy and rhythm to deliver one of cinema's most powerful anti-violence messages. Grease, 1978. How could a sunny, upbeat musical like Grease cause controversy? Believe it or not, parents and critics fretted that its light-hearted story about high school cliques, romances, and cars sent the wrong message. Danny Zuko's cool leather jacket persona and Sandy's transformation from good girl to rebellious fashion icon left adults worried that the film encouraged kids to value style over substance. The panic went even further. Some argued that the film's humor, innuendo, and emphasis on image glamorized peer pressure. Schools debated whether its catchy tunes were appropriate for student performances. But here's the reality. Grease wasn't a handbook. It was a celebration. Its charm came from music, humor, and the universal experience of awkward teen years. Audiences didn't walk out with a new moral compass. They walked out singing, "You're the one that I want." Instead of corrupting youth, Grease became a nostalgic touchstone, embraced by families, schools, and community theaters for generations. The panic was misplaced. The reality was that it offered joy, energy, and one of cinema's most beloved soundtracks. So, were these films really corrupting the youth or just reflecting fears that society wasn't ready to face? Time and again, movies have been blamed for rebellion, restlessness, and bad behavior. Yet most simply held up a mirror to the world young people were already living in. Which of these classics do you think truly shook the culture the hardest? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe for more deep dives into the movies that define generations.